I'm a little surprised, that is how you're assessing whether or not he's been doing his job.
Let's go to the next one. The next one was he was asked a question. How are you doing your investigation?
Are you assessing him based on the questions that were posed to him on the floor of the Senate, or are you assessing him in your capacity as a lawyer, watching how the anti-corruption war has been?
Yes, but you can see that the NBA, even the body of lawyers, have on several occasions issued statements deprecating the way and manner the FCC is going about the anti-corruption war. In some cases, the FCC will turn back to fight and say it is corruption fighting back. That's why we're looking at this now.
But lawyers have been divided over that.
For instance,
lawyers have not totally agreed.
For instance, on this issue,
that the NBA has been correct on that position.
For instance, on this issue, the Constitution presumes every person accused of an offense to be innocent until proved guilty. The question is, does the EFCC have the power? Let's assume somebody is alleging that committed corruption of 10 million naira. Does the law, EFCC Act, Constitution, or any law give the EFCC powers to detain Mope indefinitely until she admits and even pays back the 10 million when she has not been tried, when there's a presumption of innocence in her favor? That's what's going on now. And Magu was asked that question. He didn't deny it. He could not explain it. He could not defend it. No, so if Nigerians...
I want to ask you quickly, have you seen, it's been making the rounds, have you seen any of his responses to the query that was issued to him? Because basically what was happening on the floor of the Senate was that the questions that were raised in that query, the questions that were raised, not just in the query now, but in the report of the DSS, was what he gave a response to.
No.
His response has been making the rounds all over the internet. Have you seen any of them?
I haven't seen much of all that. I was very interested in that live interview because there were suspicions which some people had as to the motive of the Senate in rejecting him the first time. So,
did you have that suspicion as well?
I didn't have that suspicion. In fact, I'm among those who felt that what the Senate did as a body, constituted by very experienced men, some of them had held public offices in other areas, they actually meant to give the presidency and Magu a soft landing. That was the whole thing that was done that first time. And if Magu and the presidency had accepted that soft landing, we would have been saved a lot of dissipation of time and energy in this anti-corruption fight. Because another competent Nigerian, because there were 180 million, we have other competent Nigerians, security men, police officers, military personnel, as required by the Act, who can do this job better than Magu. Except if somebody is saying that Magu has a talisman, Magu has a magic wand, that it's only him that has the spiritual power to fight corruption in Nigeria.
Perhaps,
But if there are other Nigerians that can do the job, if he has been rejected by other ministers, people have been rejected just based on report from DSS. And so, in this particular case, we should even be commending the DSS for being independent, like one of the commentators has said. Being a body of the executive and still having the courage to say what it knows about a particular candidate without minding whose ox is God. What the DSS deserve here is commendation from Nigerians, just like we criticized them when they invaded the judges and exceeded their powers. We should also be courageous enough to commend them when they have acted dispassionately, like in this case.
We shouldn't question them in terms of the dual report they are said to have issued on the same day, on the same person.
That is a matter for the executive, because fortunately, both the DSS and the EFCC and the entire presidency are
sometimes it would look like as if sometimes the executive works in its own corner. The Senate works in its own corner. Just a moment, and it's only Nigerians who have an overview of what is going on in both areas.
And
they're wondering why it is that there is this disconnect.
No, it's not a disconnect. Please, like you asked one of the guests, is this, your team asked one of the guests, is this an interplay of democracy or is anything wrong? I am not among those who believe that there is a disconnect. There actually ought to be some disconnect. That is what is called separation of powers. There ought to be clear separation of powers to avoid arbitrariness and abuse of power, to avoid dictatorship. The Senate, the National Assembly should be independent. The executive should be independent. And the judiciary should be independent. That is why some of us are calling for amendment of Section 308 of the Constitution, which gives immunity only to the executive and does not give to the legislature and the judiciary. You cannot talk about separation of powers where all three arms are equal. And the leader of the executive cannot be arrested. Governors and president cannot be arrested. Deputy governor cannot. But Senate president can be arrested. Chief judge can be arrested. Now, that does not make for equality. If, therefore, we want to have a progressive government, Section 308 should be amended and the immunity should be removed completely so that people will be conscious of the consequence of the law when taking the action. And if immunity must be there at all for the executive, then it should be for the leaders of the National Assembly, Senate President, Deputy Senate President, Speaker House of Reps, Deputy Speaker, Chief Judge of the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and the Chief Judges of the Federal High Courts. And so that these judges will be independent as well to carry out their function. For instance, in this case now...
Mr. Anumudu, I'm afraid that we have run out of time. I'm going to ask you quickly, how would you want this matter to proceed or to end, as it were?
The matter is so simple. I keep saying it. Anybody who is making this matter look complicated must have a hidden agenda. There must be something that person wants Magu in person to do for him. And we should stop that in this country. We should stop magnifying and exalting individuals over and above institutions. I've just told you how I suffered the consequence of corruption. The president may also have suffered that also. And you see a president who is determined, sincere to fight corruption. And that can only be done not by Magu as an individual, but by the institution of the EFCC. So if the DSS has given us a report that, look, this man will constitute a problem to the anti-corruption fight, and he was interviewed by the Senate, and the facts the EFCC the DSS used to come to that conclusion, all the facts were presented to him for him to clear, and he could not satisfactorily answer any of them. How can anybody in all good conscience be suggesting that Magu be reappointed or be left in acting capacity or be foisted on Nigerians? Because don't forget, unlike what the last speaker said, that the president represents Nigerians, it is the Senate that represents Nigerians.
I'm afraid we have to go and call it a day at this point. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily. We've been speaking with Isaac Anumudu, who is a lawyer and a policy analyst. Well, thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily again. Sunrise Daily will continue in just a moment. Don't go away.
Thanks for having me.